Well, hello. Welcome back from winter break. I hope everyone had a great Christmas holiday break with family, friends, and I hope you are ready to get back into school. And in bio, we're starting off with cells. I'm sure you are familiar with the term cells, but they are, like the title says, the basic units of life. And they are a very important topic in biology. So we're going to use a model to explain the structural and functional differences between plant and animal cells. There is a fundamental difference between these types of cells. So let's get into the warm-up. And it says, cell theory states that all living things contain one or more cells. Why do you think cell theory meets the definition of a scientific theory? Do you think it should be a scientific law? Explain your response. So pause the video, give your little explanation, and then here's the sample answer once you're done with that. Cell theory meets the definition of a theory because it has been tested over a long period of time, and scientists have plenty of evidence to support this theory. However, that doesn't seem to meet the criterion of a scientific law. Scientists only know about life on this planet, so the theory may not be universal if life is found on other planets. In addition, scientists don't have much data on the earliest forms of life on Earth. So from what we can see, we can have a pretty decent theory as to how life works, but a law takes more universality to say that's a scientific law, that any living thing has one or more cells. So it kind of shows the extent of our knowledge in science and how we don't know everything, right? Next warm-up question. An antibiotic is a type of medication that cures infectious diseases. Why does the word antibiotic suggest that these medications would be ineffective against viruses? Well, it's in the name, antibiotic, antibacteria, not antivirus. That's how I would. And if we look at the sample answer, the word bio in antibiotic suggests that antibiotics kill living things. Bio, living, biology, you're studying living things. Viruses have genetic information, but they don't have cells. There's no such thing as a virus cell. They don't fully meet the definition of being alive. Fun fact. All right, so now we're going to talk about the history of cell theory. You can differentiate between a living and a non-living thing pretty easily, but have you ever thought about what it really means to be alive? That's getting kind of deep here, right? If you compare your body to a clock, you'll find some similar characteristics. The gears inside the clock work to move the clock's hands, much like your own bones and muscles work to move your body. Your brain instructs your bones and muscles to move, similar to how the pendulum and the clock controls its movements. However, you meet all the characteristics of life, and the clock does not. The clock is made up of plastic and metal parts, while your body is made up of trillions of living parts called cells. Here's the body. And here's the internal workings of a clock. Clocks are pretty interesting in their own right, but we're talking about living things. And the basic characteristics of life. Non-living things may have some of the main characteristics, like that clock, but only living things have all of them. And let's discuss what these characteristics are. 1, they're made up of one or more cells. A cell is the smallest functional unit of life. Some organisms, such as amoebas and bacteria, are unicellular. Uni means one, cell, so these guys only have one cell, and that's it. They're so tiny, they only have one cell. Larger, more complex organisms like you or me, humans, animals, they are multicellular. Multi means more than one, many, and they are made up of lots of cells. This is a picture of all living organisms are made up of cells with defined boundaries. So do you see how these cells have space around them? And you can tell that each one is definitely its own entity, its own thing. So they have a defined boundary. All living things have a particular shape. They all have a boundary or an outline that defines their shape. Skin is the body's fence or boundary. On the other hand, non-living things like fire, air, they don't have a defined boundary. They don't have fire doesn't have skin. Fire and air doesn't have these like tangible cells. Living things use energy. All living things need energy to carry out basic life functions like breathing, moving your body, and reproduction. Plants and some single-celled organisms use the sun's energy to make their own food. They then convert this food into energy. Other organisms obtain energy through the food they eat. They have internal organization that helps carry out basic functions. All organisms have basic structures or processes that help them carry out the basic functions of life. Humans have complicated organ systems, such as the nervous system and the circulatory system. Single-celled organisms have structures inside and outside their cell to perform all the functions they need to survive. Living things grow and develop. Organisms grow and develop throughout their entire lifespan. Growth is not limited to height and width. Even when we reach adulthood, when you become an adult and stop growing taller, your cells will continue to repair and replace themselves for the rest of our lives. Cells are constantly being regenerated and replaced on all of your parts of your body. Eliminates waste. Living things need to eliminate waste produced through normal body functions. So we're thinking of things like digestion. Humans release food and liquid waste through their urine or feces. Sweating and exhaling air also removes waste products from the body. Senses and responds to stimuli. Living things respond to a stimulus, and a stimulus is a situation or event that causes a living thing to react. Stimuli can come from inside or outside the body. Humans sense the external environment by touch, sight, sound, smell, and taste. Internally, we have mechanisms that respond to stimuli. For example, a full stomach signals the brain to stop eating, and running forces the lungs to breathe heavily and the heart to beat faster. Bacteria that live in the gut and help in digestion can sense and respond to chemical changes in their environment. Living things can regulate homeostasis. Homeostasis means internal balance. When changes occur in the environment, your body reacts by trying to maintain a balance. For example, when it's cold outside, you shiver, and that causes your muscles to contract. And this contraction of your muscles helps warm up your body. And warming up your body will maintain a stable internal temperature. And similarly, some bacteria can live in extremely acidic conditions because they have internal mechanisms that monitor for changes in pH in their environment. So this is a fancy way of saying a living thing can adapt while keeping its internal temperature fine, right? If you're in a hot environment, your body tries to cool itself down to maintain the same temperature. If you're in a colder place, your muscles will contract to keep your body warm to maintain that perfect temperature for human living, right? And that happens with other animals as well. All living things. Living things also reproduce. Living things reproduce to create new organisms. The cells of living things have specialized structures with genetic information that's responsible for the development of traits. So think of your hair color, your eye color, skin color, the formation of body structures, and the performance of body functions. So the way your body fits together and how your body actually moves and performs. Living things duplicate genetic information and pass it on to their offspring. Offspring means kids. Some non-living things may appear to reproduce. For example, fire can grow and even spread to other areas. However, that's not duplication of genetic information, and therefore you can't say it has reproduced. So that's important to note. Even though non-living things may seem to grow or make more of something, it's not reproduction because you need genetic information to be duplicated. That's an important thing to remember. Here we have a mama lion and her offspring, the cubs, playing. All right, and we run into our first question. Explain how a dog meets all of the characteristics of life. You may conduct your own online research using credible websites to answer the question. So, looking at the characteristics we just looked at, how does a dog fit those characteristics? So if you use an online source, you can find this information yourself, but I'll give you a sample answer here. A dog is a multicellular organism. It obtains energy from the food it eats and then uses this energy to perform its vital life functions. A dog eliminates waste through panting, feces, urine, and respiration. It has a definite boundary as its internal organs are covered by skin and fur. A dog regulates homeostasis in different ways. One is by panting. A panting dog is trying to maintain a stable internal temperature. And like humans, a dog has a complex organ system that grows and develops throughout its entire life. A dog reproduces and passes on genetic information to its puppies. It also senses and responds to stimuli. For example, a dog has a very astute, a very good sense of smell, and its mouth waters when it smells food. So these are all of the characteristics we just looked at. Therefore, a dog meets all the characteristics of life. A dog is a living being. Cell theory timeline. After observing living things for a long time, biologists developed a theory to explain cells. And that theory is called cell theory, appropriately called cell theory. And we have three important points regarding the cell theory. All living things are made of cells. Cells are the basic units of structure and organization in all forms of life. All tissues, organs, and systems are made up of cells. Cells form from previously existing cells. All right? Living things have cells. Cells, basic unit of structure and organization in life forms. And cells form from previously existing cells. Cells reproduce. And here we get a picture of cells as well. The great majority of cells are microscopic. You need microscopes to view these very small items. And biologists use two types of microscopes. You have a compound microscope and an electron microscope. The compound light microscope has two lenses to magnify the object. It uses visible light to generate a magnified image of the specimen. Modern compound microscopes can magnify objects between 40 and 2,000 times their original size. Biologists use the compound light microscope to view living material. Then you have the electron microscope. It uses a beam of electrons instead of light to magnify objects. And the lenses used here are special electromagnetic lenses. It uses magnetic forces to focus the electron beam on the specimen. The way the electrons deflect or pass through a specimen results in the formation of the image. Electron microscopes can magnify an object up to 1 million times the object's size. 1 million. So the electron microscope is more effective at looking at the smaller cells. It can zoom in a lot further. And here we get a whole timeline of the cell theory development and important events. So let's click on each image. All right, so 1590, the first microscope is developed. Dutch lens grinders Hans and Zacharias Janssen invented the first compound microscope. So that's the microscope that uses lights, right? It consisted of a tube with lenses at both ends. So it's Pretty basic compared to today's standards, but it did magnify to a certain degree. Now, about 100 years later, in 1665, Robert Hooke used a compound microscope to examine a thin piece of cork. He noticed a honeycomb-like structure that consisted of compartments with empty spaces. Hooke coined the term cells to represent these individual compartments. Does that make sense? So, microscope, 1590, 75-ish later, yeah, 75 years later, we have Robert Hooke using a microscope to look at things, and he found these tiny spaces, called them cells. The discovery of single-celled organisms in 1683. We have biologist Anton von Leeuwenhoek built his own simple microscope. He observed pond water under his microscope and was the first to observe live cells under a microscope. In 1683, the Royal Society published his work describing his discovery of single-celled organisms in pond water and milk. The Royal Society is some type of scientific academy, let's say. The Royal Society, it was known as the Royal Society of London, I believe, for improving knowledge or natural knowledge. And that is a learned society in the UK, the United Kingdom. And that was founded in the late 1600s. So right before here, the Royal Society was developed in 1660s. And it's the oldest national scientific institution in the world. So this was a big deal. Oh, sorry. Apologize. So we were here with a single-celled organism, and then a while later, between 1830 and 1855, we get the formation of cell theory itself. 3 German scientists conducted research that helped develop cell theory. In 1838, the botanist Matthias Schleiden concluded that the cell was the basic building block of all plants. In 1839, Theodor Schwann stated that animals were also made of cells. In 1855, we have Rudolf Virchow concluded that all cells develop from existing cells. So 1, 2, 3, we have plants are made of cells, animals are made of cells, and cells develop other cells. And one more slide for today, I think, and then I'll make another video. So I'll be trying to keep these videos shorter than in the past. I think it's easier to go through bits and pieces. So prokaryotic and eukaryotic cells, we see that cells are the basic unit of life, and biologists divide cells into 2 groups based on how they're structured. we have eukaryote. That is a cell that has a defined nucleus. Nucleus, that is the largest organelle. Organelle means tiny organ in the cell, which contains genetic information and controls cell function. A membrane called the nuclear membrane encloses the nuclear material. The nucleus is the command center of the cell. The word karyon, as in karyote, karyon, that comes from a Greek word that means grain or seed. Scientists use this word to describe the nucleus, which is the center of all cell functions. Multicellular organisms like animals, plants, and fungi have eukaryotic cells. Prokaryote means before nucleus. Prokaryotic cells are the oldest forms of life on Earth. They do not have a defined nucleus. Scientists refer to the place where they hold their DNA as a nucleoid. So this is a prokaryote right here. Prokaryotic cells are found only in bacteria. So think of prokaryotes being the older cells. They're not as complex, and they're found in bacteria. Eukaryotic cells, more complex, they have a nucleus more defined, and they exist in more organisms like animals, plants, and fungi. And here's a lesson activity for you to do. I can't show the video because I think I will get a copyright strike. But that is the end of that part. And next time we're going to look at cell structures. All right. I hope you found this helpful. Let me know if you have any questions. Talk to me in Canvas, email me, whatever. All right. Thank you guys, and I will see you later. Bye-bye.